streaming network CNN Plus for the newscast with Wolf Blitzer. That's weeknights at 7:30 p.m. Eastern or on demand. You can watch it whenever you want. Don Lemon tonight, live from Ukraine, starts right now. Don, there's a lot going on where you are. Looking forward to your show. It certainly is, and I know you're going to have all the late-breaking developments coming up. Well, one other thing, Don, let me ask you a quick question before I let you go, because a lot of us are watching. We're all worried, not just about you, but all of our fellow journalists, photojournalists over where you are. Give us a little sense of how you're all handling this.
On the next Vital Signs, we're exploring the future of medicine.
The work we are doing is joy.
With the team that brought us the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine.
The first subject was dosed in less than 3 months.
Could their groundbreaking mRNA technology also help treat cancer? And get a sneak peek at what other innovations the future might hold, including lab-grown organs and AI-powered medical devices.
Vital Signs, this weekend on CNN.
Selena Wang in Tokyo, and this is CNN.
Okay, hello everyone. Sorry, we're having some transmission issues. Obviously, we're in a war zone, so there's a bit of a problem. Hopefully, we are on the air now. Sorry about that. Wolf was trying to talk to me, but apparently you couldn't see or hear me, so hopefully you can now. This is Don Lemon. We're okay, by the way, for all of those who are asking. Everything is fine here. It's just a transmission issue. This is Don Lemon in Western Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm in Lviv. Our breaking news tonight, there's a new video tonight that shows the horror of Vladimir Putin's war on this country. Before I show it to you, I have to warn you that it is difficult to watch. In the Kyiv region, bodies seen in the street in the village of Bucha after 5 days of intense firefights. Unclear from that video whether the bodies are of civilians or military. Ukraine says it has recaptured the town, which is about 15 miles from the capital, and Moscow's assault faltering. Did that Ukraine attack on Russia? Was it on Russia's soil? Who did it? Vladimir Zelensky saying this tonight.
I do not discuss any of my orders as commander-in-chief. The leader of this state. You need to understand that on that territory that you mentioned, you have to know they were placing their shooting systems and firing those missiles themselves.
So Ukraine won't confirm or deny whether it was behind that fiery attack today on a fuel depot inside Russia. The attack in Belgorod, a highly militarized Russian city near the Ukrainian border. Russia claims it was caused by an airstrike from Ukrainian helicopters, a claim CNN is unable to verify at this time. Ukraine's foreign minister telling CNN's Christian Amanpour this.
I saw the video, but the quality is insufficient for me to identify whether it was Ukrainian helicopters or not. I'm Ukrainian. I have trust in the people of Ukraine and in our armed forces, and of course, as foreign minister, in our diplomacy. This is a war. They attacked us to destroy us. They reject our right to exist as a nation. So it means that we will be fighting back by all means available to us within existing law, international laws of warfare, of course, because we're a civilized nation, unlike them.
Now the Kremlin is claiming that this strike could hurt talks between Ukraine and Russia, even though it was Vladimir Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine that started all of this in the first place. And we have new evidence tonight of Russia's waning success in Ukraine. Satellite images from Maxar Technologies confirm Russian forces have suddenly disappeared from Antonov Airport outside of Kyiv. This is the before, showing protective earthen berms around military vehicles and artillery positions. And this is the after. The vehicles are all gone. It is unclear where they went. Russia captured the airfield on the first day of the war. That, as officials say, 3 missiles launched from Russian-annexed Crimea have hit the Odessa region. There are reportedly casualties, though we don't know how many. Meanwhile, buses crowded with some 700 residents of the besieged city of Mariupol arriving in Zaporizhia tonight. But they are the lucky ones. More than 100,000 people are still trapped in Mariupol. The Red Cross wasn't able to get into the city today. They're going to try again tomorrow. I want to bring in now CNN's Fred Pleitgen in Kyiv for us. Fred, hello to you. Ukrainian officials aren't confirming or denying whether they hit a fuel depot inside Russian territory. You've reported from Belgorod, where this strike occurred. What do you know about this?
Yeah, I mean, it really is completely unclear whether or not the Ukrainians are actually behind it. Certainly, that is what the Russians say. In fact, in a move that was really remarkable, the Russian Defense Ministry came out and said that it was Mi-24 helicopters that came at 5 a.m. this morning to Belgorod and hit that facility and then managed to escape. Again, the Ukrainians are not saying whether or not that's true. The video that we're seeing on social media certainly seems to indicate that there were choppers that did hit that place. It would be very difficult for the Ukrainians to actually pull that off. As you said, I was down there on the ground for a very long time reporting from that region. Belgorod is one of the most fortified cities in all of Russia. It's a military city, and right now, in addition to that, you have a bunch of Russian forces that are in between Belgorod and Kharkiv, obviously trying to press that offensive in Kharkiv, and they also have a lot of anti-aircraft weapons there as well. So certainly would have been something difficult to pull off, but if the Ukrainians did manage to pull it off and do it, then it would certainly be a big gut punch to the Russians right in the heart of their military machine, Don.
Yeah, and listen, one of the worst hit cities, on the besieged city of Mariupol. What is the latest there? More than 100,000 remain trapped there. Is aid getting to the city?
No, it's not. And that's one of the things that the officials in Mariupol are saying, other Ukrainian officials are saying as well. They're saying that not only is very little to no aid actually coming into the city, they're also saying that people who want to help also can't get into the city either. So it continues to be an absolutely dire situation. You know, there were Ukrainian officials who came out earlier today and said in total everywhere here, more than 6,000 people have been evacuated from zones that were deemed dangerous. So only very few of those actually came from Mariupol. Apparently, it's still very difficult to enter the city, which is pretty much impossible for any sort of aid, but also for people to get out as well. And you know, the other thing is, and we've talked about this so much in the past, is that some of those aid convoys that do get out of Mariupol, you know, they're shelled by the Russians, and people have been injured, people have been killed. So certainly the situation there remains very dangerous. There are still a lot of people who are trapped inside that city. As that city continues to get decimated, of course, we know from reports on the ground that that shelling from Russian positions into that besieged and encircled city, that's something that really continues without pause, Don.
Frederick Fleich in Kyiv for us. Fred, thank you. The Odessa region hit today by 3 missiles launched from Crimea. CNN's Ed Lavandera live for us in Odessa. Ed, hello to you. Odessa has been bracing for war since the beginning of Russia's invasion. Now a few rockets have hit that region. Are folks there worried more may come?
Yeah, that's the concern that still exists here, even though this is a city, Don, that had essentially enjoyed several days of quiet, but it's an uneasy quiet because everyone's waiting for what's coming next. They don't really believe that they're out of the clear in any way, and that's why they've been watching so closely what is happening in the north around Kyiv, but now they're really shifting their attention to figure out what's going to be coming from the east of Ukraine and whether or not Russian forces are going to redeploy after they get resupplied and again make the push down toward Odessa. So far, Russian forces have been stalled out about halfway between here and Mariupol. You know, the question is what's coming next.
Ed, you know, you caught up with families who have been displaced by the war, who have escaped Odessa. What are you hearing from them?
Well, you know, this has been really one of the tragic aspects of all of this, and getting to Odessa for many families who've been trapped in those southern areas of Ukraine and into the southeast areas where they have been trapped in villages and their homes, trying to escape through humanitarian routes that haven't materialized or they only materialized for a short amount of time. And we came across a shelter essentially that was handing out food and clothes to so many people who have been displaced to Odessa, who have chosen to stay here. You know, and they just described the heartache that they've been through just to get to this point. And you can hear from one woman we talked to earlier today.
When we came here, the volunteers told us to say what we need. But I'm ashamed. I've worked all my life and never asked anyone for anything. And now I have to ask.
Her little girl wipes away her mother's tears. Mother, why are you crying? The girl asks. Because they were shelling us a lot, Olga tells her.
Don, this is a family, a mother with her 5 children and her husband who had to walk through a forest by their village just to escape the Russians that were firing all around them. Getting to Odessa, even though it's a short distance, relatively speaking, compared to the size of this country, is really just an incredibly harrowing and treacherous journey for so many of these families. Don?
Ed, appreciate your reporting. Please be safe out there. Thank you so much. I want to bring in now CNN military analyst, Major General James Spider Marks. General, good to see you. And I have to tell you and everyone who's watching, we're okay. We had a bit of a transmission issue at the top of the show. But again, everything is fine. We just couldn't, trying to get to New York and from here, and so things just went haywire, but we're back now. Thanks for joining us. So let's talk about this New York Times report that the U.S. is going to work with allies to transfer Soviet-made tanks to Ukraine. How significant is this shift, and what will this mean for the next phase of this war, whatever that is?
Well, it's a significant additive to the Ukrainian forces. These tanks that are coming in, the Ukrainians have used this type of tank, this T-72 model, which is a Russian-made tank. They've used these before, so they're competent. They know what they look like. They know how to engage them. They know how to maintain them. And they've really done some significant training over the course of a couple of decades where they really work extremely well in terms of combat maneuver and the synchronization of all the elements of combat, the joint force, as we call it, which means you have tanks, you work in a three-dimensional space. You have tanks, you have aircraft, you have attack helicopters, you have infantry, you have logistics, and you work and synchronize all that together. So additional tanks at this point, where the Russians are now, and you showed that imagery, where the Russians have now departed the airfield in the vicinity of Kyiv. That's a significant indicator, but they've departed that, and they're now back in Belarus or Russia, which again is no longer a sanctuary. If in fact this Hind 24 attack in Belgorod was done by the Ukrainians, the Russians aren't safe in Russia, which is wonderful. So these tanks, shorting these tanks, will be very, very helpful for the Ukrainians.
Hey, Ben, I want to talk to you about that. Let's talk more, General, about this assessment of the strike against the Russian fuel depot that you just mentioned, that Ukrainians are not confirming or denying it was them. But if Ukrainians carried this out using combat helicopters, how significant would that be?
Oh, it's very significant. Again, the Ukrainians have really turned the tide over the course of about a week. The Russians are on their heels. They're flat-footed. They're removing equipment, not because it's their simple choice. It's because the Ukrainians have set the conditions on the ground and are beating the Russians back. So they're making tactical determinations that what they were doing doesn't make sense. This is wonderful for the Ukrainians now to engage and get across the border. And look, this attack on this oil and fuel depot is not going to have a significant impact tonight on the fight that's taking place tonight. It will down the road because it severely degrades the Russian ability to conduct logistics operations. It's already been made very clear that they're not doing it very well. You know, you push logistics forward. What the Russians are doing is moving all their stuff back to rekit and refill, you know, and get ready for the next initiative if they have any. So it's wonderful for the Ukrainians to take the initiative and push the Russians, keep pushing the Russians, and set those conditions.
It impacts negatively on their ability to refuel. What about the psychological blow to Russia? I mean, this is 25 miles inside their borders, as Fred Pleitgen reported. It's a heavily defended area, isn't it?
Well, you have to imagine that it really is. I mean, at the start of the war, Fred Pleitgen was right there in Belgorod, right? And you saw all the multiple rocket launchers launching from a position of sanctuary, i.e. they were in Russia, nobody was shooting at them, and they were launching their missiles in the direction of Ukraine. So you have to imagine that it's highly protected. It's been, and Fred has indicated that it's highly protected. And so for the Ukrainians to conduct this operation, number one, it speaks to the professionalism of the Ukrainians, if in fact they did this. Deep planning, deep strike operations, you have to evade air defenses, you have to jam their radars, etc. There's a lot of planning that goes into that. Then you have to fly these aircraft at nap of earth. That means you follow the folds of the terrain, very difficult to do in blackout conditions. So they demonstrated an incredible level of professionalism and competence. And then for the Russians to think all along that they've been in some form of sanctuary, well, that's been broken, right? you're no longer safe.
Yeah. Yeah. President Zelensky was on Fox tonight talking about what happened, and he was asked about assassination attempts against him. Here it is.
Do you know how many assassination attempts you've survived?
I don't know.
But there have been some.
There are things which is difficult for me to count. My intelligence says there were such attempts, and we saw information about some arrivals, planes. There were other details, but listen, I'm alive, I'm not wounded, I'm intact. So it's hard for me to talk about this. So many people have died in our country.
He is under no illusions that Putin would like to take him out. Do you think Putin will ever give up on that?
No, not at all. And isn't it remarkable the type of leadership that President Zelensky is demonstrating? Unbelievable. When he was elected, everybody thought about this comedian, this television star was coming in to be the president. I thought,
Right.
what do we have in front of us? And you look at this incredibly, inarguably, he's become the George Washington of Ukraine. This is a remarkable man who has demonstrated measured indignation with some support and this calm, resolute approach toward this overarching monster of Russia. And he has just stood there, faced that down, and shot them the bird in the vernacular.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like the submarine guys, basically.
Exactly.
Is what he's been saying.
Absolutely. God love people with that level of resilience and fortitude and focus and understanding the risks if they get it wrong.
Yeah. Listen, it's amazing to watch, to be here on the ground and actually watch in real time how people respond to him, especially we just happen to be in between shows when his nightly address comes out, and everyone in the restaurant/bar, wherever we're eating, gets up. They're quiet, they turn the volume up, and they listen to him. And they are really, really inspired by him. The PR campaign and the way he's conducting himself really is having an effect on the morale, not only on the soldiers, but on the people as well. Before I let you go, I want to talk to you about this new disturbing video tonight showing bodies on the streets of Bucha, General. It's a village on the outskirts of Kyiv that Ukrainians have retaken. Now, Ukrainians may be retaking cities, but what's left of them, I mean, it is just, they're destroyed, they're decimated.
Yeah, frankly, it's illogical. The strategy that the Russians have at least purported to have has been completely changed because of the conditions on the ground. And videos like this are incredibly difficult to absorb. I mean, the human cost of this kind of a fight is very, very obvious. And so what you see with the Russians is that they realize they cannot take on the Ukrainian forces in a ground combat engagement because they are losing. And so the only success that they've been able to achieve is through terror tactics, the use of dumb weapon systems, and they attack civilian targets. This is not warfare, it's criminality.
Yeah, right on. General, thank you. Be well. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Don. Be safe.
Thank you very much. So for a big picture look at what all this means for the overall conflict, I want to bring in now CNN's Fareed Zakaria, the host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS. Fareed, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. There's been, since I've spoken to you, there's been so many twists and turns in this war. This fuel supply attack on Belgorod, Russia pulling back forces, multiple reports of low morale among Russian troops sabotaging their own vehicles. The U.S., Putin is saying that Putin is self-isolating, possibly firing some of his advisors. Not a lot going Russia's way. How do you see this?
Not a lot going Russia's way, Don, but that worries me. Because what worries me is that the Russians do not still seem serious about negotiating. Zelensky, to his credit, has been incredibly brave. He has been incredibly courageous. He has embodied the fighting spirit of the Ukrainians, while at the same time, constantly, continually holding out the olive branch for peace. He's talked about how he's willing to meet with Putin. If you recall, when he was on my program, he talked about how he'd meet with Putin, make painful concessions. He's even outlined the nature of some of those concessions. Ukraine is willing to be neutral, right? The Russians are not biting. They're not engaging seriously in negotiations. And what that makes me worry about is that facing this, exactly what you described, this fierce resistance, setbacks on their part, are they going to get more and more brutal? Because, you know, one of the things you've been pointing out, Don, this is going badly for the Russians, but Ukraine is slowly being destroyed. And I really worry about how much can the Ukrainians take. They've been so brave. And I just wonder whether we need to start thinking about what is it that will get the Russians to the negotiating table. As you know, I've always felt there needs to be greater pressure on them. We need to sanction oil and natural gas. We need to give the Ukrainians more so that they can fight even harder. Because whatever we're doing right now, if the goal is to get the Russians to the negotiating table, so far that is not happening.
I'm glad you said that, because I've been thinking that as I've been here and talking to people who have been fleeing the east, right, and coming further west into Lviv and even beyond across the borders. Yes, the Ukrainian troops are pushing the Russian troops back. They're stronger than people would have thought. They're more strategic than people would have thought. They're more cunning than people would. They have the will and the good morale and all of that. But the cities are being decimated. People are losing their lives. People are losing their homes. Families are being separated. So to what end, right? To what end? And I think you're right. What will bring Russia to the negotiating table? Because even with all of that, it doesn't seem like they're going to stop. They used the crude weaponry. They used the missiles. They even, they had a missile strike here in Lviv last week. So you're right. To what end, Fareed?
Yeah, Don, we cannot allow Ukraine to be destroyed to be saved. There has to be a better way.
Right.
Right. One of the things I don't think a lot of people understand is that for Russia, this is almost a kind of colonial war. This is not a great power thing between it and NATO. Ukraine, for a lot of Russians and for Vladimir Putin, is basically a kind of colony of Russia. And just as the French fought bitterly in Algeria and the British fought in places like Kenya, Russia is the last great multinational empire. And we're living in a post-imperial age, but this is the last one. And they're desperately holding on to these possessions, in their view, possessions. And they can't stand the fact that the Ukrainians don't want to be colonial subjects. They want to be free.
Fareed, let me ask you this. So how much of this then, for me, for Vladimir Putin, this is all about puffery and pride. I feel, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that he will destroy this country because it's smaller, because he wants to be seen as bigger and mightier, and that, he can do whatever he wants to Ukraine, that he will destroy this country in order just to save face.
That is my fear as well, Don. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like we need to start thinking about what the potential end games are. What kind of pressure you need to put on the Russians, both military and non-military, but also what is the kind of diplomatic pressure? What are the kind of diplomatic off-ramps? Are there ways to get, people like the Chinese involved, or the Turks, or, Prime Minister Bennett of Israel has a plan. I say let's try all these things, not letting up on the pressure. But again, let's just keep in mind, the goal cannot be that we have to destroy Ukraine to save it, or we have to allow Ukraine to get destroyed by the Russians to save it. There has got to be a better way, because, to see these images you're showing, it's heartbreaking, but it could go on. I think about what happened in Chechnya in the 1990s. The Russians leveled that entire region. 250,000 civilians were killed. We do not want a replay of that.
And I keep saying, tonight, $300 million more dollars. It's not about, the money. America's a rich country, and I'm sure, we can afford this in many ways. But how much longer do you keep giving weapons, keep giving money, you keep doing all of these things to try to support the Ukrainian people, which we should be doing, but then them in the interim getting decimated in the process. Are we prolonging the inevitable? Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying that we shouldn't help them. Of course we should.
I mean, look,
but are we prolonging the inevitable?
Drags on, the more towns, the more cities get destroyed. Look, you've got to fight aggression, and you've got to give them the weapons to fight back. But as I say, we have to keep searching for ways. We need an end game. We need off ramps. We need to be thinking about ways to get this to wind down. Because let's face it, there is also the reality that maybe I think the United States will stay firm. But will all of Europe stay firm? Will so much of the world stay firm? We need to be thinking about this strategically and asking ourselves, what is the best way to end the war in a way that preserves Ukraine's independence? Those are the two goals, and surely that is the task for American diplomacy. End the war and preserve Ukraine's independence.
Very good assessment. So President Zelensky is saying, he said just tonight that he wants peace. He is putting, to what you were saying, he's putting forward a proposal, but it's got to include security guarantees with real muscle to prevent Putin from attacking again the next time he wants a piece of Ukraine here. How's that going to work? And if it involves weapons and troops, how is that different than NATO?
It's a great point, Don, and I think that's why it's going to be a tough. It's going to be a tough ask on his part. If the United States were to give him a security guarantee, that's essentially the same as you say, as it being a member of NATO. I think there's probably ways in which you can provide security guarantees that do not trigger the Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. That the United States would assist. There are things like that. Even with Taiwan, for example, most people don't realize the United States is not committed to go to war in Taiwan's defense. It is committed to help Taiwan. So maybe there's a way to phrase it where you're making clear that the United States would provide assistance. And if it were not just the United States, if it were Germany, it were, maybe many of the countries of Europe. The crucial question is, can you get the Russians to respect all this? There was a Budapest declaration or agreement that the Russians signed in 1994, which is why Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. They didn't abide by that. They didn't abide by it in 2014 when they took Crimea. They're not abiding by it now. So, the real question, as always, returns back to the Russians. But I think you make a very good point. The nature of the security guarantee to Ukraine is not going to be an Article 5. An attack on Ukraine is the same as an attack on America kind of commitment, which exists really only for NATO countries.
Fareed, this is why I enjoy this conversation. This is not an inside the Beltway conversation. This is a Fareed and Don sitting on a couch conversation, which people are doing at home. So I really appreciate your answers and your candor tonight. So thank you for appearing. I'll see you soon. I'll be watching this weekend. Thanks, Fareed.
Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Make sure you watch Fareed Zakaria GPS Sunday, 10 a.m., 1 p.m. right here on CNN. So her husband is fighting for Ukraine, and she reports on it every single day. And I got to sit down with a journalist right here in Lviv who is right at the forefront of the war. That is next.
I'm Rafael Romo in Lviv, Ukraine. This is CNN.
On the next Vital Signs, we're exploring the future of medicine.
The work we are doing is joy.
With the team that brought us the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine.
The first subject was dosed in less than 3 months.
Could their groundbreaking mRNA technology also help treat cancer? And get a sneak peek at what other innovations the future might hold, including lab-grown organs and AI-powered medical devices.
Vital Signs, this weekend on CNN.
We've been building avatars since 2016, so I would say we haven't been chasing a moment. We've been building for this moment for quite some time and really studying, I think, the younger demographic and really where they're trending towards. which is really trying to express an authentic version of themselves. So, I've always felt comfortable behind a keyboard, right? So if I was in school, when I was growing up in middle school or in high school, I would be kind of nervous to maybe talk to a girl, or I'd be kind of nervous to go, show off in front of friends or communicate with friends or whatever. But as soon as I got home and I got into AIM and I got behind my username, I became the most outgoing and gregarious character that there was. You're able to create this manifestation of yourself in this very fantastical art form. So we hope that avatars can be that safe haven that allow you to express yourself from every different segment of your imagination and serve as your emotional surrogate.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
Our engine continues, our impetus, our momentum.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
Normally, this theatre would be filled with people and art and debate and energy, and so now we have to rely on the two of us.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. There seems to be some confusion that maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going? And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Amanpour, weeknights on CNN.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for a market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers. Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Hala Garani tonight.
Okay, so I've been bringing you the stories of people since I've been here, and today I got to meet with someone who does what I do. She is a news anchor covering this war, except Mariska Podolka is covering her own country being invaded. Now, Mariska anchors on the Ukraine's, on one of Ukraine's top networks, and has been on air doing her job since the invasion started. Her husband, a former politician, is now fighting for Ukraine. Her children have been evacuated out of their country in an attempt to keep them safe, or I should say, have been evacuated out of their city to the western part of the country. She gets to see them occasionally. She got to see them today. Now, Mariska is determined to do what she can to help her country. She calls it her mission from the anchor desk. Here's our conversation. How are you?
I never know what's the right answer to this question, considering who is asking me about this.
Yeah.
I mean, if people from Ukraine is asking me how am I would say I'm fine because I'm alive, my kids are okay, and my husband is alive. But I mean, if somebody from the outside is asking me, I think the comprehension of what is going on will come later, because it still feels, even to me, so unreal.
I'm sure you could feel the pulse of the nation. I mean, you could feel, what was that like?
For me, it was very emotional because apart being a news anchor, the start of the war for me meant that my husband was leaving for the army.
Харківщині від вибуху загинув неповнолітній хлопець.
We understood that this war will be in every family in this way, in one way or another way. And that morning, we knew that some of TV anchors were not able to be at the TV station just because they had to take care of their kids, to take them to safety. And actually, that's the biggest discussion I think that I had with my husband maybe a month before invasion, because he was being very responsible about this war. And he said, you have to make me a promise that on the day of the invasion or whenever it starts, you just put your kids in the car and take them to safety, and I go to the army. And I said, what about my job? I mean, I have a mission to go to a TV station, and I don't think it's less important than your mission to go to the army. Президент Володимир Зеленський.
As you're on the air then, you knew your husband was going to have to go away. Did he go away immediately?
Actually, when I was done with my first broadcast, and on that day, I rushed back home because he was already back from Western Ukraine where he took kids, and he had only 15 minutes to get back his backpack, to put on his uniform, and to go and be at a designated place.
And what was that like?
For me, it was heartbreaking because I didn't know whether, I mean, to tell you the truth, I don't know whether I was going to see him again. I mean, because the guy is going to the war. What can you expect?
How did you decide who goes on the air when? Because I notice when I'm here, I'm flipping through channel after channel after channel. It has a different name on the screen.
Yeah.
But it's the same.
That same picture.
Same picture, same people on.
Now it's divided very proportionally amongst all TV channels who are in this United News. One day we have a night shift, the next day we have morning shift, then we have day shift, and then we have this evening shift. And then we repeat. So it's all equally divided between channels, but we're also all the time in this reserve studio. So anytime somebody cannot be on the air, cannot broadcast for whatever reasons, they feel bad, I mean, they're sick, or whatever happens with their technical facilities, or they have to go to the bomb shelter, we fill in.
There's a backup.
Yes.
But I notice it's just, I think it's just one camera, straight to camera. There's no different, it's not fancy.
Yes, because
there's no bells and whistles.
Yes, it's wartime.
Is there any understanding for you as a media person that the Russian people are being brainwashed, that they're not seeing free press? And that's why they're in part doing what they're doing? Large part, really, because they're not getting the right information.
You know what? I have a very personal story about this, because my husband was born and raised in Russia. His parents are in Russia. And they've been to Ukraine many times. They've seen us, they've seen people, they know what is going on. But still, at this point, they are brainwashed by Russian news, and they think that we deserved it.
So you don't think you'll have a relationship with your in-laws?
Not very close relationships. We had some actually break after Crimea was annexed.
So you had a break?
We had a 5-year break.
You didn't talk to them?
No.
Did he talk to them?
Sometimes, because they're their parents, just saying how the kids are.
Has he spoken to them?
He asked his mom not to text him because he said that it's very hypocritical of her to be asking how he is or showing some care for him when our children are being bombarded by Russian missiles.
Do they believe him?
I don't think so, because they never wrote back.
That's tough.
But you know, having a job now, unlike many people in Ukraine, that's what keeps me distracted of all my worries that I have, because that's the only time I don't think where my husband is, or whether he's alive now or something happened.
It's a nice distraction.
Yes.
You said you have a mission. Is that mission to inform people and not have them be like Russians?
This is the first mission that you said, that inform people and not to be real news and not propaganda. But now I see a special mission for myself, as I was the person to announce that the war has started. I have to announce that it has ended. So I'm waiting for this mission to happen in my life. Hopefully I will see that moment this year.
What will you say?
I don't think that I will have words at that point, and maybe I will start saying something about Ukraine, and will be pushing my partner to pick me up, and will be crying, because I think at that time I will have an excuse for tears.
I hope she gets that moment very soon. There's a physical war, and then there's the information war, and we're going to look at how Putin and the West are fighting for public opinion. Stay with us.
All new Inside Africa. Go inside the inventive minds, evolving places, and creative trends of the Africa you need to know now. Nigeria's emerging musical artists are ready for the global stage.
But now I can record my music in my house, get it on the internet, and distribute it to the world.
Inside Africa on CNN, in association with Zenith Bank.
The Santos de Cartier. Now, the story goes that in early 20th century Paris, Louis Cartier of the famous jewelry clan had a Brazilian friend, Alberto Santos Dumont. Santos Dumont was one of the pioneers of aviation, but Louis Cartier often heard him complain about the fact that checking your time when you were flying one of the planes of those days, for which you needed both hands, was very difficult when all you have is a pocket watch. So after a while, Louis Cartier presents Santos Dumont with one of the first ever purpose-built wristwatches. And that watch has come down to us as the Santos de Cartier. If you look at this watch, with its squarish profiles, with its exposed screws, what you see are the skills of a master jeweler transferred to watchmaking.
Sunday, Russia's Ukraine invasion and a strong man's grip on power. A former oligarch gives Fareed his take on the sentiment in Russia. Could this unprovoked war be Putin's downfall? Fareed Zakaria, GPS, Sunday.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories. On Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa, in association with Dangote.
Throughout Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the West has been using intelligence to paint a picture of how demoralized the Russian army is. Even before Vladimir Putin invaded, the U.S. was releasing intelligence saying that the invasion was imminent. My next guest says intelligence is now being used as an instrument of power. He's Doug London, and he is a retired senior CIA operations officer and the author of The Recruiter, Spying and the Lost Art of American Intelligence, and he joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Doug. You say that what we're seeing in this conflict are global powers using intelligence as an instrument of power. Tell me more about that, please.
Well, absolutely. If you just turn the clock back to November, had Russia invaded before the U.S. began this campaign of declassifying intelligence, I'm not so certain that Ukraine would be seeing the type of international support that it's received. I'm particularly dubious that Poland and Germany, who had been fairly problematic NATO partners, would have adopted the postures they had today. You look at the mystique that Putin tried to depict as being this omniscient master strategist. So much of that has been deflated by exposures of his true designs and by the disinformation that he was putting out. And if you consider the 8 years almost of training and support that the Ukrainians received from U.S. intelligence and special operations forces, I have to think that's contributed significantly to their battlefield success against a numerically superior force.
Doug, you worked in intelligence for decades. Give us your assessment of the intel that was released about Putin being misinformed by his own advisors.
I think that's a fair assessment based on how we've seen Putin act currently and in the past. He's not really been reckless. He's a former KGB officer himself. He likes to have the plans, and he likes to plan several steps ahead. So I think it's fair to calculate that his own decision-making was based on flawed intelligence, and it's really a system he's created, a power of his sort. How many people are really going to go tell him the bad news to speak truth to power? The question I get often is, would the U.S. be embellishing? Would it be making up this information? Legally, it's actually prohibited. And I know there's skeptics and cynics, but U.S. intelligence is not allowed to be used to influence public opinion in the United States, which is where these news stories ultimately land.
How dangerous is that?
I think it's dangerous when he's been making plans on the type of intelligence which would lead him to make serious mistakes, and clearly his judgment has been flawed. We already see the blame game starting, and it may even turn into a full-fledged purge with his apparent arrest of senior FSB officers, particularly the one who led the FSB directorate that was in charge of intelligence for Ukraine and the other Soviet states. So I think an insecure Putin is obviously a dangerous Putin, but I also think that his escalation has been tempered by the exposure of his plans, by keeping him on the defensive, by keeping him reactive. And I think we see some of that in Russian actions today on the battlefield.
Doug, the United Kingdom's intel chief is saying that Russian soldiers are low on morale, refusing to carry out orders. Can releasing that information have an impact on the battlefield?
I think we have to accept that a lot of what we are putting out is in fact getting to the Russian community. And I understand, and having heard your previous segment, that particularly the older generation of Russians are rallying around Putin, but I also believe information is getting through. Most of the younger generation is getting their information digitally. They're also going to face the tangible consequences of lost family members, as well as the economic consequences of his actions. So I'd like to think that by keeping the pressure up, by not sort of slowing down and keeping our foot on the accelerator, will continue to cause the type of internal pressure and the real consequences that will ideally make Putin more willing to negotiate.
You have a piece out on CNN.com where you talk